Here.
Councilmember Clancy.
Here.
Councilmember Shaw.
Here.
If everyone please stand, we'll have the invocation of the word and the closing pledge.
Please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, please give the Harris's family peace in this time of their lives. Give them comfort and understanding as they go forward each day in this difficult time of passing of close and dear loved ones. Please also give leaders of Hoover wisdom and understanding for the matters of the city and peace and prosperity for the city. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, amen.
Salute and flag.
Probably a month or so back, I reported to the council that the legislature had passed an act that was going to allow our Tier 2 employees to be included in, or to be part of the Tier 1 process. I believe this would be very beneficial for retention and recruitment of employees. And as soon as that act was passed, I directed our staff to start investigating that and to determine what kind of impact it would have on us as a city and the employees as well. So we've been in contact with the RSA, and we know that September the 17th, they will gather to adopt the regulations for this new act. And we also know, according to the information that they gave us today, sort of exchange, that they really won't act on anything until December. In other words, if an organization wants to do that, they're not going to act on anything until December.
Can we act on it, just give a implementation date?
Well, we have asked the RSA for calculations. We need to know that information. There's some uncertainty in the way the law is written as to how it applies to some of our Tier 1 employees, so that will have to be researched, and a final ruling will have to come out about that. That all will determine the cost for everything. So we look forward to, as we get more information, we'll keep you up to date on it, but we think it's a good thing to do for our employees, and we'll let you know the information that we get. And we'll move on it as quickly as we can. But that's my update on that. Any questions? And then each year, the Greater Alabama Council with the National Eagle Scout Association, they recognize an Eagle Scout who has distinguished himself in life work and who's shared their talents with their communities on a voluntary basis. It's a very nice, prestigious award for an Eagle Scout. And I am happy to report that our own Eagle Scout, Alan Rice, was awarded that. And he's over there just steaming, just firing darts at me right now for saying this. But that is quite an honor, and I just wanted to make sure that he was recognized for that. Thank you.
So you got your eagle at what, 44, 46 years?
That's good.
Congratulations. Any other recognitions or reports from the council? We'll move on to the consent agenda. Not much of one this time. We have a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Alabama Power. Mr. Rice
move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions? Council? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Now we're going to move on to our regular agenda. We're going to start with Resolution 60-34-19.
This resolution authorizes the mayor to enter into an agreement with A.L. Hoover Crest LLC to provide a development incentive for development in Hoover at the corner of South Shades Crest Road and Highway 52.
To a motion.
Mr. President, I move for approval of resolution 60-34-19.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Can I talk to this?
You can in just a few moments, yes, sir. Would you care to speak for the applicant, or would you like to hear what the applicant wants to show, or what?
I'll listen to that.
Okay, I'll let you come on down if you like. Okay. Mr. Knight, why don't you start us off?
Thank you, Mr. President. As you mentioned, A.L. Hoover Crest LLC is proposing the development of a retail center at the corner of Morgan Road and South Shades Crest Road in Jefferson County. For the developer, it will include a 48,000 square foot grocery, 4,000 square feet of additional small retail space, as well as 2 out parcels, and potential uses for those have been identified by the developer as a convenience store, gas station, and a restaurant. One of the 9.8 acre parcels of land is currently within Hoover's municipal boundaries and is zoned C2. The adjacent residential parcel is 5.3 acres and it's an unincorporated Jefferson County parcel. Those rebates would be paid with 50% of the new tax revenues generated at the development at the end of each fiscal year for up to 10 years or until the $3.5 million cap is reached, so whichever comes sooner. And just to add a little footnote to that, per the developer, some $600,000 is going to be utilized for the roadway improvements that Jefferson County has required them to make, and there are also water and sewer figures that are certainly significant that go into that request. The center would create over 100 jobs, minimum full, mix of full and part-time jobs. Just a few other notes. The economic impact numbers that I mentioned presently don't capture the significant increase in property tax value that will come along with the development should it occur, of which the primary beneficiary will be Hoover City Schools, as they benefit so much from the millage rates that we have in the city. The development agreement would not allow for a relocating Hoover business unless there's some extreme circumstance to be counted as new revenue in the project site. The development agreement also requires that all portions of the property be annexed into the city limits and properly zoned no later than September 20th of this year. And further, the development agreement requires the developer to pay the legal costs and fees incurred by the city in the preparation of the agreement and other transactions and the validation of the agreement up to an amount of 10. The development agreement also references that expense. So sidewalks within. Correct. Correct.
Ms. Shaw, do you have anything?
No, we actually approved that already as well, so.
Piece of property to be annexed, it's already pre-approved. Who is here to represent the applicant?
Mr. John Whitson is with Realty.
The sewer, sadly, a little bit further than you indicated, it's 4,100 linear feet to the next sanitary pump station, and are installing a public sanitary system. We'll look at that slide in a moment. We've also, in the meeting with planning and zoning and the development staff, have gone through the landscape ordinance and the tree canopy ordinance. I think we've done a good job of accommodating all of those requirements and contemplating as well the necessary visibility for the retail. What this doesn't show is, or it doesn't show very well, all this right here is remaining existing trees to remain all the way around as a buffer for all the residential space adjacent, and then new plantings anywhere where we don't have, excuse me, existing trees and vegetation to remain. This is a sample elevation of the, proposed elevation rather, of the grocer. This has, as Mr. Knight indicated, approximately 48,387 square feet, approximately. And it will include a drive-through pharmacy. Rear elevations, again, this will be a colored block building all the way around with ephes and stonework. It will also sit about 35 feet up from any of its closest neighbors. So as far as visibility goes, from the remaining neighbors, residential neighbors, they will have blocked view by trees. This is elevation of the 4,000 square foot retail pod. I probably went a little too fast over so retail pod right up here. There's approximately, so this is actually a grade level with the entrance and the intersection, and that'll come up in a second as we talk about the infrastructure. And then this Shades Crest rises rapidly from about 700 to about 755, and these shops are about 15 feet down. Elevation for those shops, front, side, and rear. Hard left, hard right, creating a failing intersection. What will end up happening is it will end up smoothing that traffic movement and extending that turn lane. As you can see, currently the turn lane ends about where my green arrow is. And that traffic lane is going to extend all the way back there and allow for retiming of the traffic light and significant improvement of the turn motion south from South Shades Crest, south onto Morgan Road, which is where the majority of the holdup occurs. If there are any detailed questions about that, as Mr. Knight indicated, we have Skipper Consulting here and they can answer some of those questions. Here's a little bit more detailed look of the connection across. This is the northernmost connection to the grocery store, and then this is the continuation. So this match line right here matches right here, and you can see that we actually improved the road another 1,000 feet past, 700 feet past the entrance. I believe with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Is there a detention pond anywhere on the property?
Yes, sir. Get back to the site plan. So, right here is the water quality basin. And so the entire site, both out parcels, the grocer, and the shops will drain to this water quality basin. This water quality basin will detain and then slowly release water out to a large, structure along the edge of the property where it does not impact any neighbors.
Is that an existing creek bed?
No, sir.
I've got another question for Mr. Skipper. Anybody else have any questions? From the council?
Mr. President, this is actually a question for you, Greg. When you mentioned some numbers earlier, you mentioned that your performer showed $10 million in revenue. How long do we anticipate it to take the city with that performer to pay off the incentive?
Based on the numbers that the developer provided and the formula for increases, we ran that out. It looks like the performs as tracked that the incentive will be paid off by year 6 or year 7.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes.
Mr. Knight, this may be for you. What are the nearest grocery stores in that area, not in the city?
Sir, you have got a Winn-Dixie, Bessemer, if you'll think right where 459 and the 150 interchange are. That is about 2.5 miles from there. Publix has a location in Helena, which is 5 miles.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Shaw.
Did you say it was a public sewer pump?
Yes,
Okay,
that's correct.
so they'll be for
supported any other development. That's correct.
This is Mr. President, and maybe this is a question, Skipper. I'm gonna call that bottom left, Morgan Road southeast bound. All right, so it's, basically at this point, 3 entrances into the site. Is it necessary a need for that left turn lane southeast bound? Is it a need for that more so? The reason why I say that, because I don't know what the distance, how many cars can fit in that spot?
The stack from here to there.
Yeah.
You mind if I flip screens to a little bit better?
Yes.
There you go. So again, we've shifted a little bit. So north went from up screen to right screen. And what you're looking at is kind of this section right here,
Right.
where you have a left in. And yes, this left in is important to the retailer. It captures a lot of the southbound traffic, which is a lot of homebound traffic. But there is very limited northbound traffic at that hour, so it's actually a pretty fast movement. Getting kind of inside baseball traffic engineer without a traffic engineer.
So I guess, will the users in the model use turn left on South Shades Crest Road as their main focal point versus trying to go down southeast bound in that tight little spot? Based upon the model, I'm just asking about from a model standpoint. 'Cause-
What we looked at, I'm Scott Skipper, consulting.
All right.
Depending on what the signal green, when the county is completed with their project, there'll be a left turn lane on the roadway to turn left. We project.
On south.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
We believe that you're gonna have more turn in there
Then
and go
right
into the
there.
right end. Secondary access is for, maybe the first time they drive it, and then, ooh, where do I turn in? But I think as your traffic patterns settle, you're gonna have more turn signal.
Yeah.
And then turn right in, and then the second one is kind of like a secondary catch for that southbound, homebound traffic.
And I'm not a traffic engineer, but is it really a need for that? Just to make sure any bottleneck really doesn't occur right there? I mean, I don't wanna rule it out, again, because I don't know how your model works, but that's the only comment I'll probably have, because what's the distance right there? How many cars can even fit right there on
You
that?
fit about 8 cars.
You can fit 8, okay.
Yeah, what we projected is northbound turning left, you need about 1.5, 2 cars, you can't store a half car.
Okay.
You know, you're about a couple of cars.
Okay.
And then southbound, a couple of cars, so.
Okay, but 8 can turn right there.
Yeah, you got
Okay,
about
I can't
200
really
feet,
tell. Okay.
figure about 25 feet per car.
Okay.
roughly.
That's the only question I had.
I don't know whether they call him Mr. Skip or Little Skip. Mr. Skipper.
I'm bigger than he. I'll let you decide, it doesn't matter to me. Oh, he's always let me know he can take me, he's down, so.
Timing for completion of this project versus the county's project.
The improvements on South Shades Crest Road and on the southern portion of Morgan Road would happen in conjunction with the development. They would be ahead of the 5-lane of Morgan Road by, I don't know, Aldot's running with that project, it's an Aldot directed project, so, you know, how long that takes. But the key point to remember is that the improvements to South Shades Crest Road will help alleviate the most significant issue that you have at the intersection, which is the afternoon left going to Helena.
I know one of the questions I've had from the public has to do with the timing of,
Yep.
Are they gonna come together about the same time? Is your project gonna come finish first? Is the county's project?
I would anticipate that this would happen in conjunction with the retail development, slightly ahead of the other project. I know that the development team has been in conjunction with the county to try to work towards advancing this into the project, to try to close that gap, but I can't speak to how much they can close that gap.
Anybody else from the council have any questions?
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to bring Chief Thornton down. Chief, you come down, I've got a few questions. Chief, let me publicly apologize for asking you to come down with your brace on. I feel kind of bad about that.
Well, it was an interesting story. Many lives saved.
Chief, some thoughts that I had with the location of this. What fire station would service that area if this resolution passes tonight?
This would actually be station number 6, located at 310 Eden Road. This would be their first new coverage.
That preserve?
No, sir, it's the one at Eden Road, Ross Creek Parkway.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and approximately how far, would be the distance?
I talked to our GIS guy today, and he said that it's 3.9 plus miles, so 4 miles, road miles from station number 6.
And
How far from Galena?
I don't know, Mr. President, but it's significantly closer with our automatic aid agreement with Helena, which this would fall into that. So their station is significantly closer than 4 miles we go.
I have that on my list, Mr. President, but thank you for asking that. And what route would you take?
We would leave Ed Road and come 150 back toward Hoover, turn right on South Shades Crest, and down there. That's our typical response to that area.
South Shades Crest? As you know, we've had significant traffic problems on South Shades Crest. So what's your estimated time of the service call?
Our estimated time right now is about 8 minutes with F week. That's considered the speed limit travel to that area there.
Does 8 minutes include the traffic problems that we so often hear about on South Shades Crest?
Yes, sir, that's pretty consistent with the numbers that we get in our response data. Yes, sir.
8 minutes to that location? Okay. And if 6 is out,
Yes, sir.
who would respond?
For that, you would probably have either Station 10 would be second view, or Station 5 from
What would be the closest, 10 or 5?
Station 10 would be the closest.
And how long would that take?
I don't have those
Can
numbers.
you give me an estimate? I'll ask that.
I would say you would probably add about 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes to that.
I know our response time is vital, so.
Yes, sir.
Trying to go over there. So we may be up to 11 minutes.
Yes, sir, for the first arrival in Hoover, yes, sir.
Okay.
But you know, we also have Truck 11, which is in service
That's
at
what-
Station 6, so that they tend to split that, so they would technically be the first, second out call, which would be the exact same response time. So really, we'd be getting into a third new engine company before we got to Ross Bridge or anybody else responding to that area.
Okay, great. And as far as Helena goes, they would be how many minutes away approximately?
I would say they would be within 3 to 4 minutes at the most.
And of course, if they were in, once again, if they were
Yes.
available to
That's
respond.
correct.
All right. That's all the questions I have for you. Thank you.
Anything else for the chief? Chief Bentley, he looks like he's having a better time.
Probably so.
All right, thank you, sir. Any questions from the council or any of the applicants? Hearing none, we'll take. Yes, sir.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir, Mr. President.
The engineer pointed out that.
Could you come down so we can get you in the minutes? I know we know you, but Wendy does.
My name is David Bradley. This may be the first words you've heard tonight, but I live at 1525 Fairway View Drive, Hoover, Alabama. The consultant pointed out that the intersection at South Shades Crest and Morgan Road is currently a failure. As I recall, I think these things are graded like school letters. So I assume that if it's a failure, that means that it's currently an L. I got a memory. So they said that it would be improved. So is it going to be, how much is it going to be improved? From an F to a D or F to a C or F to an A?
Whole intersection is not fair.
Okay.
It's certainly
Those were his words, not mine. His words.
Is the site definitions, the left turn lane, I'll show you what's happening in that. The grade is based on the land. If you count that average delay, that delay with the improvement will cut that delay in half. So that's significant.
So from a letter grade point of view,
The overall intersection might be favored.
how would it be evaluated?
See again with the overall, after the
L to D.
and in peak hour conditions, in an urban area like this, that's what we're shooting for.
Just don't use the term shooting, please. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak? Just want to line up along the wall, speed things up. Please give us your name, street name, you live on.
David Neff, I live at 1327 Lake Forest Circle, and I've lived in fair city of Hoover since 1984, so I've watched a lot of changes, and we've seen a lot of good things happen. I was here the last time I came. We were talking about raising a half a cent or a cent sales tax. So we've now raised a cent sales tax, and we're now going to practice giving away $3.5 million.
It was a half cent raise.
Half cent is what we ended up raising. I know, it was proposed to a cent, and I think it was finally agreed to. Council decided a half cent was as much. But all the citizens and all the public pays that. And when we sit down and we give money to a specific company that's out of state to develop an area that's at the fringe of Hoover, which this is where this is located. And since I just drove there today, just to look at it, because I want to see the site, it's not what you'd normally think of as a preferred area. But I do know that it's got a high traffic count, because I know some people that have to try to get downtown, and they take a variety of ways because they happen to live in Helena, and that's a disaster going through there. I can't imagine a lot of stores doing lots of business in that particular area. When you talk about the difficulty to get there, the difficulty to get around, no matter how you look at it, that corner's a disaster both ways. But from my perspective, the big thing is $3.5 million. We're proposing to pay for basically 25% of the developer's cost to develop this property, or that they think they might cost to develop the property, in return for some return down the line in the future. And at the same time, the rate that we're going to get our return over the next 10 years, we're going to have to pay for all the improvements, and the city's not going to get the same amount of money from this area that it would from every other area. So for me, I'm not in favor of it. I'd like to see that you table it, take further looking into the whole project itself, spend some time, go look at that area, go look at what they're trying to do. That's my recommendation.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak? Mr. President, I seem to remember when you were here, you only allowed one bite of the apple.
It was kind of a point of order.
Point of order.
Yeah, this is a comment.
Please speak to the council.
Okay, again, my name is David Bradley. I live at 1525 Fairway View Drive, Hoover, Alabama. I think we really have two issues that come before the council. One is the planning and zoning issue, and the other is the money issue. Okay. probably prefer not to dwell so much on the planning and zoning, but more look at the money side of it. So if this grocery store did not build in the Hoover city limits, that would be, I guess, the worst case scenario from the city's point of view. What neighboring areas and nearby represent the competition? Well, we've got unincorporated Shelby County, we've got Helena, we've got Maline, and we've got Pelham. All interesting municipalities, and they each have assets, or I guess unincorporated Shelby County is not a municipality, but if Hoover cannot compete on a straight up basis with our neighboring cities, I think we've got bigger problems than $3.5 million to solve, my opinion. One thing that is so important, as the developer pointed out, the importance of infrastructure associated with it. And let's say the project moves forward, but when it's all about the money, people, it's all about the money. When a developer goes before a commercial lender, that commercial lender wants to be sure that their money is going to be secured. And one of the greatest security elements that that lender can produce is a Class 1 fire rating. That's very important because that's going to lower the cost for the developer, and it's going to increase the comfort level of the lender. Now, I don't know the credit worthiness of the lender, that's not my business, but from a point of view, being in Hoover, having Hoover fire protection, having a property developed under Hoover business, building codes, all of these are very positive things that a developer would feel very comfortable with for a credit-worthy borrower. Next, I have to ask myself, what problem is this project solving? Are there people that live in this area now that are currently not being able to buy groceries? I mean, from lack of availability of a grocery store. They may not be able to buy groceries for other reasons, but I think there's stores available. So the proposal before you is to spend $3.5 million to solve a problem that I'm not sure is really a problem. I don't see it. This $3.5 million payment to the out-of-state developer comes at the expense of every Hoover citizen and every existing business in Hoover. And it's difficult to say no to a developer for an incentive. But what if every car dealer in Hoover winds up down this aisle and every retail store from the Galleria to the other end of 31, plus the other areas that serve Hoover, come in here and say, hey, look, if you don't grant me a 50% rebate on my sales taxes for the next 3 years, I'm going to pack up and I'm moving out of Hoover. What are you going to do? You've set the precedent. Now the precedent, you've already made some concessions to developers before. That's history. We're not going there. But somewhere this has to stop. It's not going to be easier next week and the next and the week after. I'm telling you. The current infrastructure does not support the proposed retail development. Let me tell you, South Shades Crest and Morgan Road, it's a 2-lane, in my judgment, I would call it a 2-lane country road. There's no curb and gutter down there. This is road, it's a paved road. Let's just leave it at that. Fair statement. Paved road, 2-lane, it's just pretty basic. There's no fire station there, as the chief pointed out, and Mr. Green had questioned. No police substation. Insufficient roads to support the additional traffic. And I know I heard the term Jefferson County is working on this road. Jefferson County's been working on the cut through from Galleria Road extension to Lorna Road, Old Montgomery back there. They've been working on that for I don't know how many years, and it's still not there. So if this is on the books and AlDOT's looking at it, I'd say we can pretty much count on that in the next 25 to 30 years based on the Galleria Extension Road that's going forward. This is not going to, and I will say this, in driving the area today, I did not see any construction equipment there. There was no heavy-duty bulldog. They're not turning dirt down there. So these road improvements are futuristic. It seems to me like if any money should be exchanged, the developer should be paying the city of Hoover, not the Hoover paying the developer. The impact of this project on a failing intersection now would create an additional usage. It's like if you had a 12-ounce glass. 12 ounces, that's it. You pour 8 ounces in that glass. Well, this is the first 8 ounces that's going in that glass. So the problem is still going to be an F intersection. But what happens when you pour 8 more ounces in that glass? Uh-oh. Last person to the party is stuck with a huge problem. Well, is that developer going to have to pay for the entire development that's occurred prior to that developer coming to the party? Well, it's not my call, it's your call. You know, kind of like musical chairs, last one that gets it, you get stuck with the whole bill.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
All your years on the council, your council never approved an incentive to bring business into the city?
We did provide an incentive for, we put in a turn lane for Lowe's on Valleydale Road. And there were very few incentives. Actually, developers built all the roads in Hoover when I was on the council. The city was, of course, I would say to digress for just a moment, if you look at, say, Stadium Trace Parkway, well, who are the developers on that property? Well, Hoover Board of Education was a developer because they put schools down there. City of Hoover was a developer because it put the stadium down there. Signature Homes was a developer because they're putting subdivisions down there. I don't know the names of the other people. So if developers where you can't always tell a developer, they don't wear t-shirts that say developer. It may be the city, it may be the schools. And
How was Stadium Trace paid for?
pardon?
How was Stadium Trace paid for?
It seems like this. I'd have to call on the Mr. Westhoven for that, but it's my recollection there was a state of Alabama allocation of funds that built Stadium Trace Parkway. Is that right, Mr. Westhoven? I believe that's it. I'm getting old, Jim. My memory's just not what it used to be. But lastly, let me say this. Even with this project that I think is a bad decision, this agreement is a bad agreement. In the development agreement, Article 5.2, I'm sure you have a copy of it, 5.2, item C. It says something to the effect that the amount to be invested in the development is anticipated to be in excess of $13.8 million. Anticipated. You know what the legal term for anticipation is? You know what you can go to the bank and tell them that you're anticipating something, and you know what they'll give you a loan for? They'll give you a loan for $0. But you're being asked to give a $3.5 million check for anticipated expenditures. So what if they're not at $13.5 million? Well, as Mr. Neff pointed out, at $13.8 million, I divided this out using my calculator, not in my head. If you take $3.5 million as a percentage, check me out, $13.8 million, that's 25%. The city of Hoover is paying 25% to develop the project. My goodness, that's huge. 25% of the anticipated project. So what if they spend half that amount? Well, you could easily be paying 50% of the anticipated project. I would say vote no to the incentive and allow the development to proceed as it goes through the channels. I will not come back to the podium tonight, Mr. President.
Mr. President, if I
You
could-
can speak in the comments portion, how about that?
Okay.
One point I think on let's not make, there's a famous congressman who shows our name list right now who talked about when they lost the Amazon deal about how we were writing checks to companies. Let's be clear, we're not writing a check, this is rebates on money we wouldn't otherwise have. And if this is a deal didn't come here, that we wouldn't have the other 50% either. So this is, just to be clear, it's a tax rebate or percentage. We're not cutting anybody a check preemptively or us forever.
Well, just in response to Mr. Shaw, in my book, all money's green. And if this developer, if the council votes this, turns this incentive down, then a couple of things could happen. The project could proceed without the incentive. The project could, well, maybe they don't have the financial strength to come forward with enough down payment, for lack of a better term, to move, that their lender would lend the full amount of the project, and this project would just, the dirt would remain idle. Or someone else, now that this is a worthy project, and particularly, let me tell you, infrastructure is so important, and having that little sewer plant, the little pumping station nearby, huge. That's huge for a development. This property is, even though terrain is tough, there's a way to make it work. So I would say, I understand, but at some point in time, there's going to be $3.5 million from the treasury of the city of Hoover going to pay this out-of-state developer.
I agree. My point was that's coming out of $7 million we wouldn't otherwise have. Yes, sir.
Greg, before you come down, Mr. Mack is proposing what's to interrogate you.
I want to ask you a question about, yes, that back. No. I wanted to clarify something. We talked about the impact on Hoover residents nearby that would use this facility. Looking at your comprehensive plan and thinking about the build out of Black Ridge, that would be the closest grocery store to Black Ridge and to Trigger Creek, would it be built out, which would be roughly how many homes that would utilize this property?
Well, we have for the Trigger Creek area, 2,000 units on the books presently. We have about 500 for the Riverwoods property, which would be on the north side of Morgan Road. And then we have roughly another 500 for Black Ridge, just north of that.
So if we're gonna keep those tax dollars in Hoover, then we really better build a grocery store on this road with our developer friend from Vestavia, Alabama.
This would be in close proximity to those units when they come
Sure.
online.
All right, Mr. Knight.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did just want to make a couple of points, and Mr. Shaw touched on it already. The city is not cutting a check for $3.5 million. The risk of this investment lies on the developer. If the developer produces the revenue, the city will cut a check of 50% of the new annual revenue that comes off of that each year. So as was mentioned before, this is in an area of town, we're not expecting very much, if any, retail cannibalization. And with the completion of Morgan Road, the widening of it from 459 to South Shades Crest Road, we'll see anticipated traffic passing through, which will stop in that center. So it'll be people from Hoover and from other areas of town who will be spending dollars in Hoover. And talking with Jefferson County officials, they don't have an exact date, but what they tell me is based on the contracts that they have, that they're looking somewhere in a 2022, 2023 time window for that widening project to be complete. Obviously, as with many things we know, those are subject to change. A couple of other things, so the sewer line and the road improvements that Mr. Whitson and Skipper showed us a moment ago would not be occurring without the development. So many of the dollars that we're talking about putting into this would be going to create that additional sewer service, the pump station, as well as the widening of the road along South Shades Crest Road and 150, Morgan Road. Incentives we've done, as you know, looking back at records, many administrations have done incentive agreements in the city of Hoover for many years now. It's a reality. It happens in communities all the way around us. It's a way of being competitive, and it's certainly showing that you're open for business and able to provide public infrastructure dollars to help bring net new dollars into the city. Otherwise, again, as I mentioned, this would not be the sort of agreement that we would have brought from staff to council for consideration.
Very good. Any other questions from the audience?
Can I just make one more comment?
If it's under 30
Real
seconds.
quick.
Okay, now you gotta come down here.
Okay.
Our new clerk doesn't know you either, barely
Yes,
knows
sir.
you. Name, street name, but let's keep it under 60 seconds.
David Neff, 1327 Lake Forest Circle, Hoover, Alabama, 35244. Just one thing. When you talk about costs, and you talk about the way that cost really works, number one, you're gonna do a whole new area that you're gonna get half the revenue from that you would normally get in any other part of the city. And that's all that I think, is because all of a sudden, we're gonna say, okay, we don't need the full tax revenue from this area anymore, because we've given it away in order to have this quote development. So we've given away the revenue, and that's, to me, is a bad thing. It's a bad precedent to start. And if you want to talk about precedents, God, the city of Kansas City, pretty big city. They were, if you read the Wall Street Journal, which I happen to, the city of Kansas City is on two different borders, right? Kansas and Missouri. And they were going back and forth, moving businesses from one side to the other because one area would give an incentive, and the other one would give an incentive, and then the other would give an incentive. And finally, the two cities got together and said, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to give incentives to move across the river, to move across the way. And I think we have to be aware of that for what we do too.
If you watch the news any in the last 2-3 months, you would already know that the mayor has already signed an agreement that Hoover will not compete just to bring people from another city into our city.
Mr.
It's
President,
gotta be new to the area.
can I address that? The development agreement actually covers that. It does not allow for any business to relocate from another Jefferson County municipality into this, and same for the city.
All right. Anything else in the public who haven't already spoken? Anything else from the council?
Mr. President, just one quick comment. I think it's important to know to the general public that only a small percentage of incentive talks that come to this city, that make it to the mayor's office, that make it to the economic development office, make it before this body. A small percentage. Every grocer that comes knocking on the door of the city of Hoover does not get an incentive. The economic development office, in conjunction with the mayor, Mr. Rice, carefully analyze these situations to figure out what is worthy of consideration of this body. So I think it is important to note that we only hear a very small percentage of these. I know many that make it to City Hall that just aren't worth considering. So I think that's just very important.
President, if I could tack on to that towards the end. So why would we want to do this? And I think Mr. Knapp and Mr. Bradley, both friends of mine, so I appreciate y'all being here, bringing up these important questions, because if you do go out there and you see this kind of thing that's out in the wilderness, you're like, why in the world would we ever expand it out here? But the last few months, planning and zoning has been working on a comprehensive plan, and the idea of a comprehensive plan in high level is that you're looking where the puck is going. You're not looking for where it is. Right now, that is kind of the middle of nowhere. However, with the 5-lane coming in, and that's going out to bid, that's a key strategic point of what the county's doing. That's coming. We also have, I don't know, Mr. Martin, how many acres in Trigger Creek down to the south? Southeast.
Just under 1,000.
So we have 1,000 acres of sovereign Hoover territory that's already out there down this road. That's coming, and it's coming quicker than we think. If you look, grocery stores are very strategic for a lot of reasons. One is because they're Amazon proof in a lot of ways. You physically have to go there. You can't have your groceries shipped, but even then, it still captures some of that. Vestavia is cleaning our clock over on the east side with a grocery store, because all the people up and down Acton and some of those places are all going to Patchwork Farm, and there's a lot of Hoover people going there. And I don't know if we have had an opportunity to stop that, but this is our opportunity to get a foothold along this corridor. And I think Mr. Bradley, y'all annexed Trigger Creek, right? Back in the day. Okay, so our forefathers wisely expanded into this area, and now we gotta go ahead and start planning strategically to make sure that happens. So right now, yeah, it's the woods, but it's already Hoover, and Hoover's coming, and we've got to start planning for that. And that's in the comprehensive plan, and that's something we worked on about this corridor. I think it's critically important that we get a foothold in this corridor, and that when that corridor is developed, it's Hoover and not a hodgepodge of different municipalities. And I'm talking down the road. So that's why I think this is strategically important. That's why I think it's worth it to give up some of the future revenue to get these infrastructure improvements ahead of time and kind of get out ahead of the puck a little bit.
Anything else from the council? Not, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Green?
Nay.
Mr. Wyatt?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Posey?
Aye.
Mr. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye. The resolution is accepted. Next is resolution 603319, Mr. Ford.
This resolution declares the following properties as public nuisances due to the overabundance of weeds and grass present thereon. 1209 Kingston Drive, and orders the abatement thereof as provided under Alabama law.
Y'all want to stick around so you can get annexed?
That's what Larry's here for.
All right. The addresses again. I'll call it.
Yes, sir. Resolution number 6033-19 declares the following properties as public nuisance due to the overabundance of weeds and or grass present thereon. 1209 Kingston Drive, and orders the abatement thereof as provided under Alabama law.
Move for approval of resolution number 603319.
Second.
Motion is second. Mr. Mack? Anything changed since Thursday?
No, sir, this photo was taken today. It's overgrown and does need to be, this is the first year for this.
Oh, you just saw it.
Yeah, this is one first.
I was worried about one getting on it.
Any comments or questions from Mr. Mack? Anyone from the public here to speak to this Kingston address? Seeing and hearing none, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Resolution ordinance 192438, Mr. Corley.
Yes, sir. Ordinance number 19-2438 authorizes the transfer of real property and its appurtenances by quitclaim deed to Jefferson County, Alabama. This property is located on Lot 1, Trace Crossings, Pump Station number 1. This transfer is made for public purposes.
We need to have a public hearing first, correct?
That's correct.
All right, we're gonna hold a public hearing before I ask for a motion. This ordinance is basically transferring ownership of this particular piece of property to Jefferson County for the purposes of sewer management. There's a pump station on this property, correct? And, since it's their pump station, we really don't have any need for that parcel.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from the audience or the council? Seeing and hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Hood?
Aye.
Mr. Honor?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Desi?
Aye.
Mr. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye. Ordinance is adopted. Next, is ordinance 192439, Mr. Corley.
Ordinance 19-2439 declares that the property described therein as surplus and authorizes the lease of such property to PVP One LLC at a rate equal to the fair market value for the term of the lease and the payment of which is set forth in the ordinance.
Okay, we're gonna have a public hearing on this as well. This is, a tower site at Hoover Central, the ballpark, the Grove Park, and would allow, the tenant, I guess, for lack of a better term, to either use the 80-foot tower that is there now or replace it with one not to exceed 120 feet. So anybody care to speak to this particular issue in a public hearing? On to the council. Seeing here none, I'm open for a motion.
Move for adoption ordinance number 19-2439.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Once again, any comments or questions? Seeing and hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Hood?
Aye.
Mr. Honor?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Desi?
Aye.
Mr. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye. Next is ordinance 19-2440, Mr. Corley.
Ordinance 19-2440 authorizes the lease of Hoover Sports Park Central, Hoover Sports Park East, Chase Mountain Park, and Spain Park Sports Complex, public park and recreation for the city of Hoover. This property should continue to be used as athletic fields, parks, community use, athletic tournaments, and other public events. This ordinance further authorizes the mayor to execute a ground lease substantially the form attached to the ordinance.
Again, have a public hearing. If there anyone care to speak to this, this is a lease agreement between the city and the city park and recreation board to allow them, control of these particular sites. They really already have it, it just makes it more official. One of the things that had come along that created a problem was their soft drink commissions. The vendor wanted to just provide one check to one entity, and that entity to distribute it fairly amongst the different ballparks. And that caused the need of this to happen. And as an additional side note, we expect perhaps as soon as the next meeting, we're going to bring a little language that would change some housekeeping in this ordinance that didn't make it in time, as well as the inclusion of all of our, I don't want to say natural parks, passive parks. That's a great term, passive parks. And that way it would put all of the city parks under the Park and Rec board. Any comments or questions for this public hearing? Anything from the council?
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Worley, could our audience, describe what a passive park is?
Just like a non-rec field park, neighborhood parks.
Neighborhood park.
Yes, sir. Like a Star Lake or somewhere that doesn't have ball fields.
Maintained
Thank
in
you.
the city, but no organized events other than
Like
somebody
low-
shows
low
up
rent
to have a family
facilities,
reunion or
viewing
something.
facilities, for green space.
All right, we're gonna end this public hearing and open for a motion on the ordinance.
Move to approve ordinance, move to adopt ordinance 19-2440.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Once again, any comments or questions from the council or audience? Seeing and hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Hood?
Aye.
Mr. Honor?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Desi?
Aye.
Mr. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye. Ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 19-2441,
withdraw this ordinance from consideration.
Second.
Motion and a second, since we have a motion to withdraw, there's no need for the public hearing. Any comments or questions from the council or from the audience? This was the short-term Airbnb title of the ordinance. This needs a lot more looking at before the city were to move forward. A motion and a second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Unless I've done something out of order.
Mr. Ray?
Aye.
Mr. White?
Aye.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mr. Posey?
Aye.
Mr. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye. Ordinance is withdrawn. Mr. Corley, Resolution 60-2319.
Sir, this item will require a public hearing and it declares the following properties as public nuisances due to the overabundance of weeds and or grass present thereon. 905 Shady Brook Circle, Hoover, Alabama, and 3555 at Dillon Drive, Hoover, Alabama.
Matt Doan.
At Dillon. Following the holding of a public hearing, the city council orders the abatement thereof as provided under Alabama law.
All right, I hold a public hearing. Anybody care to speak to these conditions on the properties identified? Yes, sir.
Mr. President, the other Mac, I have a question for you.
The other.
The 905 Shady Brook Circle, is there a house on that property, or is it a vacant lot?
It's vacant lot.
Okay. All right, thank you, I was just making sure, because it's construction.
So I'll put a sign for the house. Anything else from the public or the council? Hearing none, that's end the public hearing.
Move for approval of resolution 60-2319.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional comments or questions from the audience or the council? Seeing none, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Resolution 60-2419. Mr. Corley.
Sir, this is another public hearing resolution regarding the abatement of weeds. This resolution declares the following properties as public nuisances due to the overabundance of weeds and or grass present thereon. 1858 Burning Tree Circle, Hoover, Alabama. Following the holding of a public hearing, the city council orders the abatement thereof as provided under Alabama law.
First public hearing, anyone here care to speak to this particular issue, these addresses involved? Anybody from the council? Seeing, hearing none, the public hearing is over, I'm open for a motion.
Move to approve resolution 60-2419.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any conversation, questions, comments? Seeing, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We have ordinance 19-2445 for first reading.
This ordinance rearranges, alters, and extends the city's corporate limits to include property located at 4273 South Shades Crest Road, owned by Thomas and Sarah P. Poppy, and is shown on the map attached to the ordinance.
I have a question. I've asked about the property owners. Does anybody here know the Poppy family? I've been told that Mr. Poppy is currently rehabilitating in a rehabilitation facility, broke
This ordinance rearranges, alters, and extends the city's corporate limits to include property located at 3461 Ridgehead Crest Drive, owned by Wayne Benton, as shown on the map attached to the ordinance.
All right, next is ordinance 192447. First reading. Mr. Corley.
This ordinance rearranges, alters, and extends the city's corporate limits to include property located at 2869 Georgetown Drive, owned by Ting Chu, and as shown on the map attached to the ordinance.
Ordinance 192448. Mr. Corley.
This ordinance rearranges, alters, and extends the city's corporate limits to include property located at 1856 Buttercup Drive, lots 4A and 5A, resurvey of lots 1 through 10 and 17 through 22, owned by Moona LLC, as shown on the map attached to the ordinance.
These ordinances, 192445 through 2448, will be set for consideration at our next meeting on July 15th. The next item is to set a public hearing for July 19th, with no action taken tonight. This is a first reading and setting of public hearings on the 15th. Normally I would read these, but because I don't have a microphone, Mr. Corley, would you please?
Sir, first reading ordinance number 19-2442 amends the zoning code of the city of Hoover to add 2 new zoning classifications thereto: planned development district and special use district. Then ordinance number 19-2443 amends the zoning code of the city of Hoover to amend the supplemental use regulations concerning private swim pools. Ordinance number 19-2444 amends the zoning code of the city of Hoover to amend the sign regulation for building wall signs as set forth in Article 10 and Article 15, the 280 overlay. And then resolution number 603119 is a resolution that declares the following properties as public nuisances due to overabundance of weeds and or grass present thereon. That's 2049 Sweet Gum Drive, Hoover, Alabama, and 2335 Deerwood Road, Hoover, Alabama. The city council will order the abatement thereof as provided under Alabama law.
Very good. At this point, we are ready for comments and questions. I'd like to start off with the council. The mayor and I and Mr. Shaw were very fortunate to be able to go to the Culture City Ball that was at the Finley Center
Yes, Mr. President. Mayor, City Hall going to be open, or closed one day this week or two? Mayor.
I wish everyone a happy July 4th. Yes, we will be closed over the next day.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone from the audience here to speak this evening? Yes, sir, you come down and use your name and your street name.
Good evening, my name is Bud Usry. I live at 1071 Greystone Cove Drive. I'm also on the homeowners association for Greystone Cove. And we appreciate the city of Hoover coming out and fixing some of the potholes and some of the sinkholes that we had in the neighborhood. Our subdivision was built in 2004 or somewhere thereabouts. Our roads are getting long in the tooth and need some attention. So I've come down here tonight to talk to you a little bit about this, and I wanted to appeal to your own enlightened self-interest. That's going way back to literature when we were in school. But we have 113 homes, and the value of each home is conservatively, and I think I'm probably 100,000 low, but conservatively, each home is worth $500,000. So when we look at the values, and I'm getting ahead of myself, pardon me. We want to close the gates to our subdivision and maintain our roads. But before we can do that, we need to get the roads repaved, okay? Now, this goes way back. The guy who built the subdivision kited off before those gates got closed. And then we heard you had to have 100% of the homeowners vote to close the gates. And as y'all know, being politicians, 113 people are not gonna agree to do anything. So we have it on good authority now that if we get a majority, we can ramrod this thing through. So we'd like to get our roads paved. And then the enlightened self-interest comes here. So on average, the houses in there are worth $500,000 apiece, 113 of them. That's $56,500,000. So I called the Shelby County courthouse and talked with one of the ladies down there about property taxes. So we think by closing the gates, property values will go up 10 to 15%, somewhere in there. So if you do the calculation, 56,500,000 times 10% times the millage rate, you have 172,000 increase in taxes a year. That's 10%. If it goes to 15%, you get 258,000 more in taxes. So those developers that were sitting over here and they're going to pay their money back to you in whatever number of years, in a year, year and a half, you get your money back for paving the streets. And you would make a lot of folks in extreme East Hoover, Brock Point just got built. They're a little further east than us, over there by Shoal Creek. But we, you know, a lot of times we feel like we send you a check, but we don't get a check. Because we got Finley Center, that's in the west, right? Then on Warner Road, you got Hoover East. That's not Hoover East to us, that's Hoover Central. And then here we are. And every time we go to lacrosse or football or baseball or whatever, I'm thinking lacrosse, my son plays lacrosse, we got a trek to Acton Road or we got a trek to Finley Center. That's great. Wish at Spain Park we had something where we could do something there so we don't have to drive all over God's green earth. Now, hopefully this is my only time to ever address you. I appreciate it. I hope enlightened self-interest will help push y'all over the edge and get our streets repaved. Thank you so much.
Mr. President, Mr. Rice, is this something we're looking at for the budget next year?
Yes, Mr. President, Mr. Posey, I know that Mr. Westhoven has taken a look at this. You know, we operate on a grading schedule. It's done by an outside engineering firm, be as objective as possible. They go around and grade our streets every year, give us a priority list, and we're not bound to that. Obviously, that's a guidance document for us. I'm sure that we can go out and evaluate from an engineering standpoint where Greystone Cove stands. The gentleman raises some interesting possibilities there. We might need to have a conversation with our HOA if they were willing to engage in some type of an agreement, the nature of which he might have just outlined for us, and that might allow us to pull them out of the stack, so to speak, and do something a little different, not preferential, but just based on what he explained. I think that has some interesting possibilities.
Mr. Westover and Mr. Long, I know Mr. Shaw and I had conversations during the budget process last year. Unfortunately, it was one of many, many projects that were able to be funded. Do you recall about what it would cost to repave those streets? It's not that large.
I don't recall right off the top of my head, Mr. Smith, but we think it's somewhere between $200,000 and $400,000. We're not completely sure about that, though.
Okay. Yes, sir. Oh, well,
The numbers that we have is 340,000, and if you subtract the numbers that you've already patched, you know, that's probably gonna bring it down about $100,000.
you're gonna have to repave all of it. Patched areas are gonna get repaved as well.
Okay, I'm not a
Right,
paper.
you have something?
No.
All right, yes, sir. Name and street name.
I'm Ron Koblenz, and I live at 1131 Greystone Cove Drive. And Tim, nice to see you again. You and I rode streets about 2 years ago. There are 9 homeowners from a neighborhood of 116 homes. I will venture to say that's probably the most Greystone people you ever had in this building at one time. And it's because of their frustration. And our last HOA meeting, there was significant conversation about spending on a single fiber wire from here over to the Finley Center at $392,000, which is way more than it would take to pave our streets. And another proposal for $455,000 to run a single fiber wire over to Valleydale. Is that correct in assessment? What I'm hearing? Because our neighborhood thinks that's what we're spending money on. And the sole beneficiary of any of that fiber wire are City of Hoover employees. Is that correct? No? Who else benefits? 911 callers. Okay. Do we have a reference for how many people in the City of Hoover have access to fiber? Pretty small number, right?
Well, it's growing. There are a number of vendors that are laying fiber.
Okay. That was, what I get is what I read on Hoover Sun, and as much digging as I can find. Was there documentation, a presentation here to the City Council about spending that money on the fiber that we can see?
There was an extensive presentation.
It's not posted anywhere that I know of, is that correct? I'm sorry?
About 2-hour-long discussions available on YouTube.
Kind of like this one here, right?
Literally 2 hours.
Is that a document or anything that the public would have access to?
There's a PowerPoint document that's in the council record book that
That'd be great. And then secondarily, what I hear mostly from homeowners is when, you know, I know we assess the streets, and I've gone through all the PDF files in the past and looked at the roads and looked at how we're trying to allocate the money. If there's something that I can show our neighbors to help them understand when, that would really be great. I don't know if there is current evaluation, because I just went through this budget. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I can't tell you what we're spending on paving in the City of Hoover this year. I can tell you that we got a $4 million gap, and that we hope to pay our principal and interest down by 2036 to $6 million. But I can't tell anything about the paving schedule in here. Is there anything we can have for that?
Typically about $7 million.
So is there anything that we could share at our next HOA meeting before we have 15 or 16 homeowners show up next week?
$3 million. I stand corrected. $2 or $3 million. I know the city's gas tax has to be spent on roadways. It's a state and stuff that the city's gonna spend a small portion, shared portion. I think you bring, I don't think your issue has fallen on deaf ears. This individual did the budget this last fiscal year, but we did better than the $3 million loss that was anticipated last year, so who knows, maybe this will be in favor of us.
You must have got a better consultant. I know stuff. You've always got people asking you for money. We understand that. The perspective from a homeowner when we're spending money that is on a single fiber wire that's literally, we could pave our neighborhood 3 times of what we're proposing to spend on single fiber, and we don't even have access to that. And we're looking at our home values and potholes still in our streets, and we could pave the potholes every year for 5 years, and it would cost you a lot more money than just to get it done. So, appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Mr. President, can I make one point?
Yes, sir.
And I can only speak for this administration. You know, we've heard quite a bit from our stakeholders in the Greystone area, part of town, throughout the election and also throughout the 2 and some odd years we've been here. And we've been extremely aggressive in trying to incorporate the feeling of, or lack thereof, of not being recognized as far as being part of Hoover and things that have occurred. We've heard also about not having representation on different boards in the area. So I can't speak on this. We have not only went above and beyond to try to make sure that's a reality by putting representation on the school board, representation on the library board, representation on several different boards since our administration. One thing I can guarantee you is this right here. Many times people come before the podium, we do listen. I think we went from having, and this is not a punch at anything, 15-minute meetings to about an hour and 30-minute meetings, because the president has established that he wants to listen to the public, and that's the bottom line of it. So I think you got a very board that's proactive, a council that's very proactive, a mayor that's very proactive, that actually listen. So I want to leave you with the impression, this is another time we drove here, we got to drive 40 minutes back across town to get nothing done. So I do want to say that, just look at the track record of the last 2.5 some years, we are listening. I know this administration has tried to do some things in creative over in the Terrasaw area, because many folks have said we don't even have a place to have meetings at. We got to come all the way across town for meetings, library, things of that nature. So we're being very aggressive. We are listening. So this is not just empty talk. So please feel free to get my information or anybody's information. We're happy to talk with you. But I think this is a very active board that listens to the citizens. I'll just leave it at that.
Mr. President, that's all. Do you have, you mentioned, you looked at getting the gate, closing the gates and taking over the responsibility for the roads. And you said you need a majority vote. You have all that in writing, and you have that as well? Because I think that's a good conversation to have, to maybe, when we talk about budgets next year, what he's proposing is completely different than what most people propose when they come to the council. I think the conversation there gets this moved up in that budget process next year.
Good, well, we'd love to hear that conversation.
Well, if you could maybe verify some of your numbers.
Mr. President,
Mr. President, Mr. Mayor.
I actually went out and rode those streets about 10 days ago and came back and talked to Mr. Westhoven about this subdivision, so it's already kind of in the works, looking at it, evaluating it, and I appreciate y'all coming out tonight, kind of reinforce how you feel about it, but I do want you to know you're not being ignored. I went out and rode it myself.
Mayor also likes to run long distance. When you get him coming running, he probably run.
Well, it was at the request of one of your neighbors who mentioned something to me, so I rode out and came back, talked to Mr. Westhoven about it, so we're listening.
Yes, Mr. President. My colleague, Councilman Murphy, I just mentioned to him that I think it came across that the prior administration did not allow citizens to speak their full time if they wanted to, and I think that didn't come across properly as Councilman Murphy was now we're having a sidebar discussion. I just want to be clear, never, ever, never was any citizen not allowed the full amount of time and more that they wish to speak during any of the, 2 terms that I was on prior to this. I think I and Mr. Smith will agree with that.
That's what was sacrificed, yeah. Anything else from Ms. Shaw?
Very quickly, I agree with Mr. Posey that we need to get kind of a fresh legal view, if there's anything changed in the last time, get that reconciled, because last I heard our legal opinion was the same, because the financial changes of the tax-paying public, we had to take 100%. So we need to get that reconciled for sure. I guess the second question, I'm not going to stop Mr. Window, but if we have these, I don't know, it feels like it, but I'm just kidding, I'm really not. We have a consultant that grades our streets. Is that graded as is, or do they give a projection for? Okay, so we have a lot of roads that have came online in the late 90s and early 2000s of this era, and it might be good to, as we move forward, to kind of have a projection of a 3 to 5 year, and so we kind of know what's coming, because it seems to me, we spent, what, $3 million on resurfacing, $2 million, whatever it was. Yeah, I mean, that may have worked for a while, but with some of these big tickets coming on, with a lot of mileage that probably